What's up guys, it's me Lego Paradise here, and today I'm going to show you some more of my progress on my motorized Lego racetrack. It's been a while since the last episode, and there's still plenty of work to be done, but I've made some significant changes and improvements to my racetrack. So the biggest of these changes and additions include the implementation of the Mindstorm's flag starting system for the racetrack, a new mechanics pit outside the pit stop building at the back, the biggest visual difference, which is the addition of this brand new building, which includes a cafe and restaurant at the bottom and the winner's podium at the top. And I've also redesigned and fixed up each of the cars so that they're a lot more closer to being finished. So let's take a better look at each of these things. Let's begin with the flag starting system. You might remember the prototype of this from last episode, and as you can see, now that I've added it to the racetrack itself, it can be used to start and stop the race depending on the colour of the flag that's waved in front of the sensor. I'm really happy with how this has turned out, and it's definitely an improvement over the old way of just pushing a switch on and off to start and stop the race, since now the cars actually respond to whatever colour flag is being waved. And you can see this is actually really cool in how it works, because the flag doesn't have to stay facing the sensor. The sensor sort of remembers which was the last colour that it saw, and the cars either keep on driving or keep on being stopped, depending on the last colour flag which they saw. So this is what the actual size of this mechanism looks like, and as you can see includes a lot of power functions and Mindstorm's motors and components all working together. So as a quick reminder, if you've forgotten how it works, you have the two different colours in front of the sensor, and then the sensor sends the information of the colours into the NXT brick which holds the program. And then you have the Mindstorm's motor, which turns, and depending on how much it turns, it switches on and off the remote control for the power functions. And that is linked to an infrared receiver, which you can see it with the green light at the back. And that's also connected to the battery box, and then the motor, which is currently hidden underneath the racetrack. And the reason this is so complicated is of course to link together the power functions and the Mindstorm systems, since I thought this was the neatest way of doing it, even though it is a little bit complicated. So let's quickly see this in action, and for that we're going to need to turn on the Mindstorm's program. So you can see we're now running the racetrack, and you can simply change the colour of the flags and then watch the light on the remote control. Notice how it changes depending on which way the flag is pushed. So if we start it or stop it with the different colours, you can see how the green flag activates the remote control, which then starts the motor, which makes the cars drive around the track. And then by flashing the red flag, you can see how the remote control is deactivated. And that's basically how this system works. One thing which I am planning on modifying though, is just making this whole area looking a little bit more nicer. So for example, instead of this really basic support out of bricks for the sensor, I might build a small building or at least some sort of wall just to hide it a bit more, so it's not so obvious that it's there. And I also want to adjust this cable, so instead of having to go all the way to the back and then down underground, the cable just goes simply straight down into a hole at the back of the sensor there. But apart from that, it works really well, and I think it also looks pretty good considering how functional this is and just how complicated this flag starting system is. But I think it's definitely worth it because it adds a cool little detail and definitely makes the racetrack a bit more realistic and immersive. As well as this change to the racetrack mechanism, I've also made an addition to the area around the back of the racetrack. My plan is to eventually have another building here, maybe include something like a gift shop and some administration type buildings for the racetrack. And obviously, since this is next to the massive pit stop building, I didn't want the buildings to be right next to each other. So I thought, what better way to break up this space than by including an outdoor mechanics pit. So I based this off some real life designs, and I'm quite happy with how my Lego version has turned out. Because as you can see, it includes this platform which the cars can drive up to, and then this can be raised with a dial, and this can go quite high up, and you can see how that looks even better with a car on top of the platform, which still leaves plenty of space for the mechanic to work underneath. And then I've left the space around the mechanics pit nice and empty in case I think of anything else to add to this area later on. Next, let's take a look at the race cars. I've made a number of improvements and additions to each of the cars, and one of the most noticeable visual differences is that now each of the cars has its own interior, which includes a minifigure driver, a steering wheel, and a dashboard. And you can see how in every one of the cars they've either got a different coloured steering wheel and driver, or maybe even a different dashboard design to the other one. These cool interiors are made possible because I've completely rebuilt the internal structure for each of the cars, so they're now all much the same underneath. And this of course improves the performance of the cars as they're driving around the track, since they all are able to go at the same sort of speed as each other. For example, you can see that they each have an equal amount of space for the steering magnet at the front, and they also have this small hinge plate assembly, which is where the race drivers are attached to. And you'll see what I mean, because in these cars I haven't actually used a full size minifigure. I've only used the top half of a minifigure so that they're able to fit inside the short height of the cars. So for example, you can see how it is only the top half of the minifigure attached to the hinge plate to create the appearance that they're sitting down, and their legs are hidden under the front of the car. A bit like in the real life Le Mans cars, how you'd sit in those. And I think this is much better than just raising the height of the cars, because this way it allows the cars to be a much more realistic scale, since the dimensions are much more proportionate to the real life versions. So I don't think that's too bad that it's not actually a full minifigure, because I think it looks good and works quite well anyway. So now let's see the changes which I've made to each individual car, starting with the Porsche 917K. So the biggest difference with this one is that I've actually modified the back a bit, so that just like on the real one, it's got a bit of exposed chassis, or a sort of roll cage effect, where you can see that protects the back and provides support for the structure. And there's also a couple of rear tail lights and indicator lights. They're a bit tricky to see against the red bricks, but you can see how they're made out of some transparent orange and transparent red 1x1 plates, and they work quite nicely and just provide a bit of variation to the back. But really, this car was probably the most complete out of all of them when I started, so not much has changed with that one. Then with the Porsche 956, I've done a bit of change to this back area here, and you can see that that's now 5 studs wide, where before it was only 4 studs wide. So the reason for this is it helps reduce the gap between the 4 stud wide windscreen piece, and just makes it look a lot better, in my opinion, from above and when viewed from the side. It just looks a bit more proportionate to the real life version. And then another change is with the spoiler at the back. That's now actually complete, as well as the back bit itself, which includes some very simple lights and a much more simple structure than the Porsche 917, but it still does the job and is pretty much complete now, at least structurally. Then with the Jaguar XJR 6, this is also a lot more complete at the back than it used to be, And unlike the Porsches, the back of the wheels is a bit more like a traditional car, where it's covered up, and this is just made out of some smooth dark green panels. And then you can also see how I've attached the rear wing at the back. Since it's supported by two supports in real life, I thought the best way to achieve this is by using these small bar pieces with the clips and attaching them to a 1x2 plate with the bar attachment. And you can also see how I've tried to keep the colours as accurate to the real life colours as possible by including some white decoration on the back and on the spoiler. And apart from that, some of the areas around the front are changed just to allow the windscreen to be able to come off a bit more easily. So that all works nicely. And again, this one is pretty much finished, except for a few areas. And of course, like with all the cars, I still need to add some stickers and decals onto them. And then with the Jaguar XJR12, this has undergone a pretty major redesign. Because if you remember from last time, I've replaced the cover for the back wheel with a more streamlined and more accurate version. So, in case you don't know, in real life, this Jaguar XJR12 has a removable panel that you can cover the back wheel with, just to add a bit more of a streamlined and aerodynamic appearance. And I've replicated this in my Lego one by just building some smooth bricks over a wheel that's actually indented by a 1x4 space between the wheels instead of a 1x6 space like on the front. But that works pretty well, and with this new method it allows me to include a small gap in this panel where you can actually see a bit of the wheel as it goes round. And this is also accurate to the real life version, where it's not a solid panel, there are some gaps and holes to allow you to see the wheel inside, and probably to provide cooling in the real life version. But that works really well, and I'm much more happy with this new design rather than how I had it before with the plates, which stuck out quite a bit and just didn't look very good when looking at the car from the sides or from any angle really. And obviously there's still a few different bricks that are in the wrong colour I need to order some more of, but that's pretty much finished as well. And you can see that I've also done a cool spoiler design that's supported by two of these clip pieces, and that's also pretty accurate to the real life Le Mans version. So those were the biggest changes to the cars, and they're a lot closer to being finished now. Really all that's left to add are a few missing pieces and some stickers to represent the number of the cars and the sponsors and adverts that are featured on the real life versions. Now we get to the latest addition to the structures around the racetrack, which is the cafe and winners podium building. My original plan wasn't actually to have this winners podium on the corner here, since originally I was going to have it somewhere next to the pit stop building at the back here. But since building the pit stop building, since it turned out such a nice design, I didn't want to cover it up too much, since it's already pretty covered up by the Dunlop bridge in front of it. And if I was going to go with my original plan of building the tall announcer's tower, the commentator's tower, it would cover it up too much. So instead I thought it'd be better to move the winner's podium over here on top of the cafe. And this has turned out to be quite an interesting design for a building. You can see how it follows the curve of the racetrack around the corner. And it also has quite a unique interior. And I'll show you that in just a bit. But for now, let's take a look at the winner's podium itself. And you can see that that has a checkerboard pattern. That also curves around with the use of a bunch of hinge plates, as well as the podium, which is made of a few simple bricks and shows the positions of the race drivers where they finish, with either first, second or third represented by the printed 1x1 tiles. And then I've decorated that with some more flags and printed pieces, as well as a bunch of checkered flags that hang down and are attached to the roof here. And to access this area on the roof, I've added a staircase around the back that extends off of the main building and goes down to the pit lane area, where you can see I've placed a bunch of fuel tanks of all sorts of shapes and sizes as sort of the main fuel storage for this area. And then around the other side, there's the staff entrance to the cafe, as well as some trash cans and more fuel containers. Since this area around the back is more of a behind the scenes area where the workers and employees of the racetrack would be. Okay, so back around the front, we can take a look at the cafe inside. So like with all of the buildings on the racetrack, I've made the roof of this building to be removable, so you can easily access the interior. With the roof removed, you can really get a better look of the shape of this building and how it follows the curve of the track. And this is achieved with some more of these hinge plates, and they just connect a bunch of these glass windows and glass doors together to create this really nice curve on the inside. And that also leaves some space for a small spectator balcony area around the front, where if you've finished eating your food, you can just open the door slightly and access this area that's fenced off behind the protective barriers and view the race from there, from outside. Or of course, if it's raining, then you can simply look through the windows while you're seated at the tables. And these are some pretty simple designs for the tables. I just have 2 tables inside the cafe, but I've decorated them with a few recipes and menus and drinks, things that people have ordered. And I feel like the bright yellow colour scheme really stands out and matches this area of the racetrack. So if we start by looking at the interior, how to access it, obviously if you're in the spectator stand and you feel like grabbing something to eat, you can just cross the bridge, since I've made it connect all the way to this door. And that door currently doesn't open that well because of the seat. Obviously, if someone wasn't sitting there, then you can always just open the door up and access the cafe. So for the area where you serve yourself, I've styled this after a all-you-can-eat style restaurant, where it has these covered food areas to store a selection of snacks and pastries that you can grab yourself and put them onto your plate. And there's a small area so you can slide your plate or tray across to the counter where you can purchase a drink and pay for your food. And that counter doesn't have that much space, but it's got enough for a staff member, a fridge at the back, and a small sink. And that's the door which you saw that leads outside. But that's currently hidden underneath the roof, and you can see how that's actually part of the other base plate, which is why it doesn't remove. And then on this bit, this is not some pastries, this is some fruits and vegetables on a printed 1x2 brick, as well as some fries next to the vegetables and fruits, and some cornflakes, with a little bowl just so you can serve yourself and pour yourself some cornflakes. And then there's not much space for anything else in this cafe really, but I've just decorated the walls with a clock, and the floor also contains this really interesting and themed kitchen checkered tile floor that also fits with the checkered design for the flags on the top, and that's really cool, and I'm really happy with how that's turned out as well. And then it's really simple to just place the roof back on. You can see how it locks into place on the smooth tiles, and there you have the winner's podium and cafe/restaurant building. So those were the main additions to the racetrack since last time, and I've still got plenty more plans and ideas for what I can have around the racetrack for the future. So be sure to check back soon for the next episode. If you enjoyed my progress so far, then don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment, let me know what you think, or maybe if you have some ideas for the racetrack. And I'll be back next time with some more LEGO videos. Thanks for watching.